Have you ever really thought about how we get honey? I mean, how we went from just, grabbing it from a wild hive to the kind of sophisticated, sustainable beekeeping we have today? Well, it's an absolutely amazing story of human ingenuity, a ton of trial and error, and our slow, evolving partnership with one of nature's most important insects. So think about this for a second. For most of human history, getting that delicious golden honey was, well, a pretty destructive act. You basically had to choose. Do you want this amazing sweet treat, or do you want the bee colony that made it to survive? That was the fundamental problem for literally millennia. So what changed? What was the big breakthrough that let us work with the bees instead of against them? To find the answer, we have to go way, way back. Our fascination with bees is ancient. We're talking nearly 3,500 years ago, with records carved right onto the temple walls in Egypt. And these aren't just pretty pictures. They're the very first documents we have, giving us this incredible glimpse into the very beginnings of our beekeeping journey. All right, so here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to walk through 5 key eras. We'll start with those ancient roots of honey hunting, then see how we moved from logs to skeps. After that, we hit the big one, the 19th century revolution. Then we'll look at how the harvest was perfected, and finally, we'll see how modern science completely changed the game. So, let's dive into that first stop, ancient Egypt. It's really important to remember that back then, what we call beekeeping was, honestly, a lot more like honey hunting. It was all about collection, not really about cultivation. I mean, these ancient carvings are just remarkable. They're more than just art, right? They're a window into a time when honey was this precious, almost magical substance. But look at the process they show. It's this cycle of collection and storage that, more often than not, ended with the total destruction of the hive. This was the challenge, the problem that would drive innovation for the next 3,000 years. Okay, let's move forward and see how people started making the first real attempts to give bees a home. Instead of just raiding wild nests, people began creating enclosures, trying to bring the bees a little closer and, get a little more control. And people all over the world were experimenting. You had everything from simple hollowed-out logs in ancient Europe and Africa to these really beautifully crafted clay pots in Greece. And then, of course, there's the iconic woven skep, which became the symbol of beekeeping during the Middle Ages. Every single one of these was a step forward, another attempt to better understand and manage these incredible creatures. And this right here, this comparison, it just perfectly illustrates the huge problem with those early designs. With a traditional straw skep, you couldn't check on the colony for diseases, and getting the honey almost always meant killing the bees. Now compare that to a modern hive, where the harvest is non-destructive, the colony is saved, and inspections are just a routine part of the job. That difference is everything, and it's what inventors spent centuries trying to figure out. And that brings us to the 19th century, the great leap forward in beekeeping. Seriously, this was the moment. A series of absolutely brilliant inventions, all within just a few decades, completely transformed our relationship with bees forever. Okay, so at the heart of this whole revolution is one guy, Lorenzo Langstroth. In 1851, his critical discovery was something he called bee space. He figured out that if you leave a very specific gap, about 3/8 of an inch, bees won't build comb in it or seal it up with propolis. This simple, almost elegant observation was the key, the secret to creating a hive with frames you could actually pull out, finally letting us look inside without destroying their home. Langstroth's discovery just opened the floodgates. All of a sudden, beekeepers could get inside the hive. And this led to this cascade of inventions, each one building on the last. Mehring's foundation gave bees a perfect blueprint for their comb. Grushka's extractor meant you could get the honey out gently. And Quimby's smoker made inspections way safer for everyone. Altogether, these inventions created a brand new era of beekeeping, one that was based on cooperation, not destruction. So with these big, core inventions now in place, the next phase was all about refinement. How could we make the process of harvesting honey even more efficient for the beekeeper? And, most importantly, even safer and calmer for the bees? The modern extraction process is really a tribute to the genius of those 19th century inventors. It's like this carefully choreographed dance between the beekeeper and the bees, and it's all made possible by the smoker, the movable frames, and the extractor. And the result? A harvest that's not just efficient, but sustainable, because that precious comb can be put right back in the hive and used again and again. And the innovation didn't stop either. The bee escape, for example, was such a clever invention, a simple one-way door that made honey collection a much calmer experience for everyone involved.
Then came specialized tools that made uncapping cleaner and faster. And of course, the first electric extractors brought beekeeping right into the modern industrial age.
All right, now we're entering the final era of our story. This is where the focus shifts from mechanical engineering over to biological science. Beekeepers weren't just managing bees anymore. They were starting to actively breed them for very specific traits.
And this was a monumental shift. The development of artificial insemination for queen bees sounds like something straight out of a science fiction novel, right? But it gave beekeepers a level of control that was just unimaginable before. They could now select for things like gentleness or resistance to disease or how much honey they produced. For the very first time, they could essentially help design the perfect bee for their own needs.
Now, this massive scientific leap was really built on the foundation of earlier pioneers, guys like G.M. Doolittle, who had already figured out how to raise queen bees on a huge scale way back in the 1870s. When you combine those two breakthroughs, mass queen rearing and precise insemination, it was an absolute game changer. It really marks the moment beekeeping went from a traditional craft to a modern agricultural science. So, from ancient Egyptian carvings to modern genetic labs, we've pretty much solved that original problem of how to work with bees instead of against them. It's been this incredible 4,000-year journey of ingenuity. And that just leaves us with one final thought. After all this time, and with all the new challenges we're facing, like climate change and habitat loss, what do you think the next great breakthrough in beekeeping is going to look like?